I was basically born in Cape Town, South Africa, and I spent the first part of my life there until I was about 13 years of age. And I remember the days when my mother used to cry because she didn't know how she was going to feed her 4 children. I'm one of 4 children, and we grew up extremely poor. And it wasn't for lack of effort on my dad's part. He worked terribly long hours, except he worked in a job that didn't pay him very well, and his biggest problem was that he wasn't a white person at the time. So I'm very privileged to be living in Australia, and I was lucky enough that my family immigrated to Australia when I was 13, and I went to school and worked very, very hard, because one of the things that I vouched to do was to never experience poverty like I did as I was growing up. And the thing that got me excited was the prospect of pursuing a great career, and I ended up pursuing a career in the IT industry. So I was in the computer field, and in my last job I was actually with Hewlett-Packard. But that wasn't all good either, because I found that even though I worked very, very hard and went to uni and all that sort of stuff, when I started to get promoted, which seemed to be fun at the time, but very soon I realised that I was working for the company, and they seemed to be getting more out of me than for their own purposes than me personally. And I found myself doing enormous hours and working 70 to 80-hour weeks. People thought I had the luxury of travelling everywhere, but that was normally on my time. So I'd travel to another place on the weekend so I could be there on Monday morning to work. And I started to realise that it wasn't fulfilling me. And then I started to think about my situation and thought, if I've worked this hard to get here, what awaits me? All I can imagine is to continue to do the same thing. And so it was about that time that I started to take a look at my boss. And the reason why I took a look at my boss is because I figured that if I was to continue what I was doing, then the only thing I could hope for was to get his job. So, I took a look at him, and his name was Greg, and he was in his 50s at the time. He'd had 3 failed marriages. He was in a relationship, a permanent relationship, but he didn't get to see his 4-year-old son very often either. So I started to wonder if I was making the right decision. And so it was about then I had a major awakening, because the path that I was on was not going to give me any fulfillment. Sure, I was well paid as far as a job goes, nothing like what I get paid now, but at the time, a lot of people would have thought that I was being silly when I decided to look elsewhere. And what I decided to do was to study everything that I could on the subject of trading and investing in financial markets. And I focused specifically on the share market to start with, and as I got results there, I got into real estate as well. Now, a funny thing happened to me. A number of years after I started to achieve some great results in it, I actually was able to walk away from my job. And at the time, I was being paid about $200,000 a year in my full-time job. And my friends thought I was absolutely nuts for walking away from that job. But the thing that they didn't realise is that by trading financial markets only 2 to 6 hours a week, I was actually able to match that income or get very, very close to it. And so it no longer made sense for me to work in the corporate life, because I was able to follow a different strategy. And I figured that if I didn't have my job, I could probably do more of that stuff. So I decided to walk away from full-time work as it was, and that was back in early 2000 or so. My first official seminar was to Uncle Mario in his lounge room, to 10 people that we all knew, and of course they told other people about it, and then I'd go over there and Trey and I would present to them, etc. But unfortunately, one day we ran out of friends and family, and we had this really exciting thing that we were doing, and then a good friend of mine actually invited me to a business course where I learned how to actually do some advertising and all that sort of thing. And so the same ad that you probably responded to in the paper is the same ad we've been using for the last, since 2002. So, it tends to get people here, and that's fine. The unfortunate thing about advertising is that you really have to make yourself out to be something that maybe might appear not so real. And the thing that I hope you get most out of this program is that we're actually extremely down-to-earth people. And the thing is, if I don't have the Ferrari in the photo, people don't come to the seminar. But once they're here, I think striving to have a Ferrari is probably the most shallow thing you could ever strive for. But for some reason, that's what gets the people here. So my job is to get you thinking that it's pie in the sky stuff, and then make it real for you in something that's a lot more wholesome and special. So I'll see how I go with that today. But I bet you don't know anyone who lives on the street. I'd be very surprised if you know anyone who lives on the street. Yet you go overseas and you see, not dozens of people, but thousands of people who are hungry. They don't even have basic things like security. So why I share that with you is because I grew up in a very struggled upbringing, and I don't think I'm a particularly intelligent person. I don't think there's anything special about me. And the whole point being that if we live in an environment and a society like we do, and I was able to make a success of it, then it means absolutely anybody here can. And all you have to do is just pay attention to what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm very excited to be here because I know that Frey and I have had the privilege of massively changing people's lives. And yes, we do focus on it from the perspective of helping you make money, but ultimately what we want to do is help nurture your environment so that you can actually be a contributor to the planet.